everyone. Welcome to another episode of New Age to New Life podcast. Super excited for this week, but before we get into it, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We're really excited for what this platform is going to do. But without further ado, I want to welcome this week's guest. We have Laila on the pod today. Hey, Laila.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for coming on. I'm so excited. So your story, Laila, honestly always resonates with me, and it always will. And I feel like there's just so much of our stories that combine together that's so beautiful. So I'll definitely let you touch on how that is or what brought that to be. But I'm really excited, and I really want this episode to just be like an open floor for you to really share your testimony from like the very beginning to where you are now, because man, where you are now is not the Laila I met in 2021. It's a completely different Laila, which is so beautiful. But really, like, I want to give you the floor. It's yours to share what is the life of Laila to where it brought her today. So please tell us.
Well, yes. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here. It's crazy because you have been here from the beginning. Yeah. Like, you were the first person that I talked to at church when I kind of had my whole realization of like what I wanted to do and like that I wanted to follow Jesus, and then all the way up until now. So I love you. And I'm so glad to be here. So yeah, I'll get started. So I mean, I grew up in the same area pretty much my whole life. I was always kind of going back and forth from my grandma to my mom's house. I was a troubled kid from like first grade, second grade. I got suspended, got kicked out of school in like 7th grade. So I was always in trouble. And then in high school, sophomore year, that's when I started to get into like the partying scene, drugs, alcohol, and I would party like every Saturday. And so I think with that brought a lot of like emptiness, and it brought a lot of friends, but it's crazy because it's like I had a lot of friends, but then it brings more emptiness. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know how that works, but I would say, with that, like with partying and everything, it just brought like sadness, and it brought me to not really knowing like why I was here and what I was meant to do, because I was, partying all the time. And so I think that led me to that question of like, what's the purpose to life, And I was always a deep thinker, like even as a kid, like I wanted to research everything. I wanted to know everything. And so I was really intrigued on like, why am I here? What is my purpose? Yeah. And I remember, so sophomore, junior year, I was crazy. Senior year was actually COVID for me. So I was not in school. A lot of my friends, like, we kind of separated because we couldn't really hang out. Yeah. So I kind of got into just like watching a lot of podcasts, and I was just home all the time. Yeah. And that's what actually opened me up to New Age. My first encounter with like the New Age, which I didn't know it was New Age, was I was watching a podcast, and I don't want to put them on blast. I mean, if people watch it, maybe I'll put it in the comments. But I was watching a podcast, and they started touching into like the purpose to life. So they started talking about the stars, the moon, and how that like kind of explains and resonates with your life. Yeah. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like that makes so much sense, and then that's when they started talking about like horoscopes and everything. And I was like, oh, I'm a Leo. Yeah. Not a Leo. Yeah. Okay. Like we know that now, yeah. But I was, at the time, I was like, this is so cool. Right. Because I was searching for something, especially since I didn't really have many friends. My home life, like I didn't get along with my mom, or like I didn't have my dad in the picture. So I was like searching for a purpose, for a reason. Yeah. So yeah, like that podcast really opened my mind up to a lot of things. And I remember like I would just listen to it, and I was like, it's just me and the universe, And so I would like go outside, and I would like smoke weed. I smoked weed like all the time. Yeah. I watched your episode, and just like you said, like when I woke up in the morning, first thing was weed, and then it was breakfast. And then like after breakfast, weed, all it's like a habit, Right. And I don't even know why I did it. It gave me anxiety. But yeah, so same. I would like, like literally, I would go outside, smoke, and I would just listen to this podcast, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my mind is so open. They started talking about the third eye, which is supposed to be like pineal gland or whatever, and how that's like, it ties you into the spiritual realm, Right. And so they started talking about all of that, and I was super, super intrigued. And so I found myself identifying with that and making that my belief system and who I am. Right. And so I started telling like my friends, my mom, like oh, mom, like, I discovered something. Like, I'm spiritual. I'm a spiritual person. Right? And she's like, okay, like, whatever. And I'm like, no, you don't understand, you know? Yeah. I was like, this is the purpose to life. And it started out very, like, innocent, you know? It started out just watching that and having these small beliefs in, like, horoscopes and stuff.
Right.
But, like, little do people know, and little did I know, that it just gets worse and worse. And, like, the path, it just opens more and more. Yeah. And so, you know, I got into drugs, and I'll get into that a little bit later. That opened me up to spiritual. Yeah. But, like, more of what that podcast did was they started talking about things like parallel universes. And people believe in that, and I don't think that they know that it also ties into New Age. Yeah. Because it's, like, the universe. So they started talking about that. They started talking about, like, the simulation theory and different universes and different beings and different, how you're a soul. And that brought me to a place where I literally lost touch of reality. And I was like, I didn't know who I was. Yeah. You know, like, I believed in the universe. I believed, like, that I was spiritual. But it brought me to a place where I genuinely believed that you, my mom, my dog, my friends were all versions of me in a different universe, you know? And I was where I'm at, but, like, and then I would think, like, okay, and, like, a Buddhist that's really, like, high up there, that's me in a future universe. Wow. And I was so out of touch, like, with reality. Yeah. To the point where, like, I would be, like, driving, and I would see signs on the street, and everything was so spiritual to me. Yeah. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? Like, oh, this person's talking to me. And, like, I had so many out-of-body experiences from that, you know? So that's where my New Age journey started, was with a podcast, which is crazy. Because this is
it's literally crazy, right? Like, full circle. Because it's like, as you're speaking on all these things, like, it's bringing back all these little memories of, like, my New Age journey and, like, beliefs that, like, coincide with, like, your beliefs. And it's so crazy that something so small and so simple, but in reality, we know that it's an open door. Yes. And that's why we have to be so careful and so mindful of what we're participating in, what we're watching, what we're allowing in, because something so simple, for me, it was as simple as, you know, people say, like, oh, mindful meditation, empty your mind for 15 minutes per day to help with anxiety or depression or whatever the case. For me, it was really that simple of sitting down for like 15 to 30 minutes and doing a mindful meditation that took me down this rabbit hole. So it's like, we have to be so careful, and it's like, there's so much danger in the New Age realm, because it's like, it starts off as something as simple as a podcast or something as simple as a 15-minute mindful meditation, and then next thing you know, like, for example, you know, you will get more into it, but you went really, you know, deep down that path. So did I. Next thing you know, like, you're connecting to the dead and in the process of becoming a witch. Like, it's the craziest thing. But it's so interesting how, you know, like, it's such an umbrella term, and I talk about this in my last episode. It's like, a lot of people who, you know, we consider as New Age don't even know that they're New Agers. In the New Age, or they even deny the fact that they're New Agers, which, I mean, I guess they have a different perception of it. I understand that, but the fact of the matter is, it's such an umbrella term for so many different things. And the reality of it is these New Agers, there is so many modalities in there, right? And they grab a hold of one, and, like, for you, for example, how you were saying, oh, the universe, and you saw everybody as, like, different versions of yourself. And it really is like, New Agers grab onto this concept that, okay, but this is my modality and I need to focus on this for this season in my life, but ultimately I'm helping the collective consciousness, right? Like, raising the vibration of the earth, which is crazy, and it's such a lie. And it's so true, though, and it's so real that people in the New Age are so out of touch with reality. And that's why, like, this, you know, this platform, it's really to just shed so much light. And that's why I'm so grateful that you're sharing such detail on it, because it's so true. Like, I feel like it could just be over, like, oh yeah, people do yoga and they meditate and they work on crystals and stuff, but it's like, no, it's so much deeper than that. And it's so much deeper. And it's like, I have such a passion for it, because, like, there's so many lost souls in it,
yeah.
you know, that genuinely, they're truth seekers. It's what they are. They're looking for the truth, and they think that they've found it. They think that they've grabbed a hold of it, but it couldn't be further from the actual truth, you know? But yeah, I know you kind of mentioned a little bit. So I know that was, you know, it started with the podcast. How did it go from there? You mentioned that you got into, you know, some drugs. So what did that look like for you after, you know, you came across that podcast?
Yeah. So like, I've always heard my friends talk about magic mushrooms, which are like psychedelic mushrooms, you know, and that ties in with like LSD and DMT, and those are all psychedelic drugs.
Yeah.
And so I always thought to myself, like, oh, I want to try mushrooms so badly. Like, and I would always say that, but I always felt like a fear there, which, because it's like a crazy drug, you know, like you hallucinate, you see things. So I was always kind of like, I don't know, like, you know, I want to try it, but I don't know if I really want to try it.
Right.
But one time I was with some of my friends, and I was in this new age, like, spirituality mindset that I had. But it was kind of at that, I don't want to say base level, because I was out of touch with reality. But for me, that was like the base level, you know, and they brought, you know, they had magic mushrooms. They were like, oh, look, like, we have this huge bag. It was like this big.
Wow.
I was like,
what
oh
the
heck? Yes. I was like,
dang.
Oh, I'm like, okay. I was thinking to myself, like, this is the day I'm going to try them, you know? And I was honestly scared. I was like, I'm super scared, but I want to do it because, like you said, like, I was seeking the truth. And, like, I felt like that was another step into taking to find the truth, you know? And, like, real quick, I want to say, that's the thing with the enemy and, like, with New Age. It's like there's always something more 100%. That you have to do to try to find the truth.
Yes, you've never arrived. And that's their thing. It's like, you're on this journey, so just keep going and go to the next one and keep striving and keep going and next healing and next this. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, no. And then you're just spending more money and trying more things.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was, like, the next step for me to find the truth, you know? And so I tried it. And I remember the first time I tried it, it wasn't super spiritual, but I was seeing things. So, like, I was seeing things move, and, like, I was seeing different colors. And I remember I was crying, but I didn't feel like a super, like, spiritual connection with it. So I was like, okay. I'm like, these aren't that bad. That's what I was thinking to myself. These aren't that bad. I'll try it again, you know? But that time I only took, like, one, because I was, you know, scared.
Right.
So fast forward a couple months later, I was like, okay, I want to try these again. So I ended up buying my own, and, like, wasted so much of my money. I remember, like, I didn't have a job. I was literally broke. I mean, I was a senior, you know? So I remember going around trying to get money anywhere. I even, like, stole money from my mom to get drugs. So I stole some money. I found money, you know, and I got together, it was like $50 for, like, I don't know, just a little bit of these shrooms. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. I put it on, like, a Nutella sandwich with strawberries.
Oh, my gosh. So cliche.
Yeah, I was like, oh, my gosh. Now looking back, I'm like, wow, girl, like, I was doing the most.
Yeah.
You know, like, Jesus, you don't have to do any of this.
Yeah.
So I tried them. And then I took a lot more that time. And so that experience, it was very spiritual for me, which is super, like, it's crazy because it really is, you know?
Yeah.
And I felt like out of touch with reality. It's like I had left my body behind, and it was like, it literally felt like it was just my soul. Right. And I was just like, I was learning, and I was getting, like, these downloads from the enemy, you know, which I didn't know. But at the time I was like, oh my gosh, the universe is speaking to me. And, like, it's crazy because before I came here, I used to have a notebook. And every time I would, you know, we call it, like, trip. So every time I would trip, I would write down in my notebook whatever I was feeling. And so I still have it. And so I was reading it, you know, I have it for reasons like this so that I can show people, like, look, I was crazy, you know? And it's crazy. The notebook, like, makes no sense. It's, like, gibberish. It's, like, things everywhere. But I was reading it, and it was saying stuff like, listen to yourself, like, be in tune with who you are. And it was like, there's more to life than what you see. It was, like, crazy things that I was getting, you know? And so after that trip, like, after that mushroom trip, I just wanted more and more. And it really, like, catapulted me, like, to another level of New Age. Yeah. And so that's when I started getting into, like, I didn't really do yoga, but, like, meditation. Yeah. And, like, crystals. So I went out and I bought crystals with my friends. I got, like, incense. Yeah. I got sage. And that really opened me up to the more, you know? And I remember, like, there was one time that I ended up saging my room. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this because it's supposed to be cleansing.
Right? It does the exact opposite. Oh my gosh. Disclaimer, you think you're saging your room and getting rid of the bad spirits, but you're actually putting a welcome here sign to all the demons.
And even like back then when I did it, like I felt the darkness that I welcomed in. Yeah. And I was like, oh crap, like what did I just do, you know? Yeah. So I remember I saged my room, my dogs were in there, I was saging my dogs. Oh my. And it was so bad. And they knew something because they were both like, they were running. They were like, get that thing away from me. And
you're a witch.
Like, yes, they knew it. I'm like, dang, I should have listened to my dogs. Even they knew. And it was so bad. And so I remember I was like watching the show on Netflix at the time when I was like saging my room. And the show was about astral projection, which also ties in. Yeah. And so after I saged everything that night, I was watching the show and I just felt like a dark presence in my room, like something so dark, and I was so scared. So yeah, I turned on all the lights and I'm like, why do I feel this way? It's like you feel like you're not alone in there.
Yeah, you feel the heaviness almost. Yes. Like your heart starts racing and it feels heavy and it feels like you're just looking over your shoulder like what is going on? Yeah, it feels ugly.
Scary. Like literally like I knew like it feels like someone's in the room with you. Yeah. And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And so I had like a mirror like facing my bed, and I remember my friend told me like, you shouldn't have a mirror facing your bed, or like I would see in movies like they would cover the mirrors. Yeah. So I literally covered all the mirrors in my room with a blanket. Yeah. And I was like, I'm literally going crazy, but I thought it was keeping me safe. You know, little did I know, like, no, if the demons are there, they're there. Like, yeah. It's, you know, it doesn't matter if the mirror's covered or not. But I remember I covered all the mirrors, and I texted this person on Instagram who was like, it wasn't like they were a medium, but I knew that they knew about this stuff. So I texted them and I was like, hey, like, I just saged my room and I feel like a really dark, heavy presence here. Like, what do I do? And they were like, oh, you opened up like a bad portal or something. I'm like, oh my god. It's
crazy. There's in their world there's like good and bad portals, right? All portals. Yeah. White and black magic.
Because I'm like, oh, how did I do that? That was an accident. And they're like, oh, you know, it can just like you can just accidentally do that. I'm like, what? Like, so you can accidentally open a good one or accidentally open a bad one. Yeah. You know, but it was a whole mess. And so like my room, I was scared to go home after that. Like I would go out for the day and I was like, I don't want to be there at night. Yeah. Because at night it's like you always feel like it's more, you know? Yeah. And it's like my room, and it's crazy because the scent of that sage, it's stuck in my room for weeks. Yeah. And so I would walk in there and I would smell it and I would feel that presence and I was just like, I don't want to be here. Like, this sucks, you know? And I'm like, okay, I'm never doing that again, you know? But I kept the sage forever. I don't know why. So anyway, so like fast forward, I came back. I had a friend in 7th grade. We like reunited, and this was like high school had just ended for me. So, you know, I was opened up to the new age. I had tried shrooms. I was doing them every so often. And then I met this friend, or we reunited. Yeah. And she lives really far. She lives like 2 hours away. But I would go out there and hang out with her. And she was actually into the new age, which I was like, what? Yeah. You know? So it's like we bonded over that. Like, oh my gosh, like we're both into like this stuff, and now we're reunited. Like, oh my gosh, the universe brought us back together.
Right. Always. That's what they think, right?
And it's crazy because all that friendship did, and I love her as a friend, but all that friendship did was bring me more into the darkness, you know? But it's crazy because you see it as a good thing, like, oh, the universe brought us back together. Yeah. But in reality, it took me darker and darker, down a darker path. You know? So we reunited, and she actually introduced me to yoga. And I didn't like do it as much, but she was explaining to me what it is and why it's in tune with the spiritual realm, which I didn't know that. Yeah. You know, and a lot of people don't know that. Like you said, like you just think it's stretching. And I was like, oh, what? That's so cool. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to start doing yoga now, you know? And so we would hang out and we would smoke, and like we would wake up in the morning, we'd have our mats out. Yeah. So bad. And we would like meditate together, do yoga together. And and you know, we were like trying to find the truth together. Yeah. You know, and it's really sad like looking back on it now, because people are really doing that now.
100%.
But yeah, we were doing that. She had never tried mushrooms before. But I was telling her, like, you should try it. It's such an awesome thing. And it's crazy because, like, I was advocating, like, for these mushrooms and for this new age life, and not knowing what it was doing to people and myself, you know? But I thought it was good. Yeah. So I wanted other people to know, and I wanted them to try it because I thought I was helping them. Yeah. You know, and I think a lot of people think that nowadays, 100%. But they don't know that you're leading people literally on a path to hell. You know? Which I didn't know that.
Literally. I remember when I got saved, that was my first realization because of like how much I preached this stuff. Like I used to be an Uber driver. I used to drive for Uber and Lyft, and I was in the New Age, and I would pick people up and I would preach New Age to them. And like always, it was like instead of preaching the gospel of the good news because I didn't know yet and I wasn't saved yet, I would literally go out, pick people up in my car, and preach, you know, this New Age version to them. And it was crazy because it's like I feel like people are so much more open to the idea of New Age rather than the idea of the gospel.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, it's wild. But something that you mentioned that really stuck out to me was, you know, you were doing these drugs, right? These psychedelics, and it was opening up your mind, and also too that you were smoking weed every day. I remember specifically, and that's why it's so important. Even like I know there's some, you know, even Christians now that are still like struggling with that a little bit. Maybe they haven't been fully like delivered from it, but are still like justifying or still like smoking here and there. I think it's so important because for me, I really do like, now looking back, I feel like God gives me different revelation and perspectives of things that I went through that I wasn't able to fully understand, or now I'm able to understand in his light. But I remember when I was smoking every day, that's really, I started to feel a presence of what I thought was like a good presence, and like almost like in a sense I thought was God. But I remember I would be smoking and I would feel so much love come over me, but it felt like it was almost like a spirit presenting itself to me. And that's really what intrigued me to find like universal love or like whatever it was, which led me down the path of New Age. And so, you know, being in this altered mind state ultimately opened me up to this as well. So that's why, you know, the Bible tells us to be sober minded and to not, you know, do things, especially smoking weed. People think it might be harmless, but it's so true. It is a gateway to all this other stuff. But also too, it's like with the mushrooms and stuff and how you were seeking truth and you went to that. I remember we actually went to go watch Jesus Revolution together. Do you remember? Like a big group of us went, and we're literally, well, I was sobbing. I think you were crying too. I was like ugly crying, like couldn't uncontrollably because when they were like at that festival, I think it was like Woodstock or something, and they were dropping acid, and it's just like, man, like that was me. And I know you can relate to that. Like that was you. And like I was at these raves drugged out of my mind, but it's like we were chasing that high, seeking that truth, like seeking more. We were like, there's more than just this physical, like there's something else, and you feel it instantly with drugs. Yes, it's extremely dangerous, but I think that's what people are looking for. And in that movie, you know, Lonnie Frisbee says that that the drugs are a quest, and then Chuck goes for what, and he was like for God. These drugs are a quest for God and for his presence. And it's so true. It's like people are looking for truth, they're looking for God's presence, but they don't know it, and they're looking in all the wrong places. And that's why it's so beautiful that like when we come to that realization and we're like, man, God, you pulled us out of so much. But I know a lot of people go down the route of psychedelics looking for that, for truth. Even now in the New Age, they do microdosing, and they do. I've heard of that. When towards the end of my journey, I started microdosing. There was like I would buy this chocolate bar that was like made in with, you know, magic mushrooms, and I would take a piece of it every day, and it was like supposed to help your mental health. And it's like crazy because people are like advocating for microdosing, and it's like you realize you're taking a little bit of drugs every day, right? For your mental sanity. Like it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so you started doing yoga, you started meditating, and then so what did it look like from there?
And you know, I love how you said like weed, it kind of does go hand in hand with like psychedelics. I mean, it does, honestly, because there was one time that I took an edible, you know, which is like, if people don't know, which probably everyone knows, but it's weed in like food, you know, so it was like a brownie. And literally, I felt like I was tripping on mushrooms. Like the sky was like shifting, but I felt so much anxiety. I could barely, like, my hands were sweating, like, but it literally goes hand in hand. I think there's a slight difference in mushrooms, but if you smoke weed, you're like on the fence right there. Like, if you're smoking weed, you might as well be doing mushrooms because they're pretty much, they're cousins, you know what I mean? And they're close cousins. They're like first cousins. They're not like, you know, they're right there. So it's dangerous, you know? So I was doing mushrooms. So this friend that I had, she didn't want to try them. I ended up bringing some to her house one day, and I was like, we were going to go on a hike. So it was like it was winter. It was snowing where she was at. So I was like,
sounds so dangerous.
I know. On a mushroom trip in the mountains. Like,
oh my gosh.
I don't
Sounds
know.
like a great idea.
Right? I don't know. So yeah, my friends knew. They were like, we're good. Because it was like her and her boyfriend, and then me. I was just like the third wheel. I don't know why. But they were like, no, we're good. We're not going to take any. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I was like, I'll just do it by myself, you know?
Yeah.
So she made me like a salami and ham sandwich, and I put them in there. Now, like, anytime, I can't eat like that same exact sandwich. I can't. Because like, I feel like I can taste the taste of those mushrooms. Like, I can't.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It's like scars you, you know?
Yeah.
So, so she made me like the sandwich. I literally, it was like, I had like a little container, and I had eaten like all the physical mushrooms, so it was just crumbs. So I'm like, it shouldn't be that much. They're just crumbs. You know? So I was like, all right.
It's just like a mountain of crumbs.
Yes. So I dumped the whole thing in the sandwich, and I'm like,
my gosh.
like chopping it. I was like,
oh my god.
I'm like, this should be good. I put the bread on, and I just ate the whole thing, right?
Oh my gosh.
So usually, like, when I would take mushrooms, like, it would take like 30 minutes to kick in. You know, it takes a while. Like, I ate those like 5 minutes later. I was like, whoa. I was like, oh my gosh. And like, at that moment, I knew. I was like, I took too much.
Oh
you
my
know?
gosh, that's so
like,
scary.
Yes. And it's scary because like my friends like don't understand because they've never done it, and they didn't do it, so they don't know like what I'm feeling. Yeah. And also like I felt embarrassed because you know,
100%.
So I was like, oh, I took too much. So like I went to the restroom, and they say like don't look in the mirror, but
really, I've never done psychedelics, so I don't know. I've never.
Yeah.
Are you gonna freak yourself out or what?
You're gonna be like, oh, I'm ugly. You know. I don't know.
Oh my
like,
gosh,
it exposes the truth. Like,
that's, I will say though, like there was times where I was like so high, or like I did an edible, and I would look in the mirror, and I would be like, dude, I look like a demon, like looking in the mirror. So that would make sense.
Yes. And like you look at your eyes. So I literally looked in the mirror, and like my face was moving. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember I was just like saying to myself, like, I'm tripping. Like, it was so bad. Dang. And like it's crazy because I have like videos, you know, my testimony videos. And so I was like reviewing those as well before this, and like I have like videos from that day. Wow. And I literally have a video of me saying like, I'm tripping.
Wow, that's
crazy. I didn't know what else to do.
It's all insert video here. No, I'm just kidding. Video on the screen. No, just kidding.
But yes, like, I was literally like, oh no, like this is gonna be a bad trip. So we get in the car to go on the hike. I don't want to tell my friends because I'm embarrassed. Like, I'm supposed to be the mushroom expert here, and I just took too much.
Guys, abort mission.
So I was like, seriously, I'm like, I'm not gonna say anything because I'm like, and I was like advocating for the mushroom, so I'm like, I don't want to like put a bad thing on them, you know. So I should have told them.
You're gonna hold it together as the saleswoman for mushrooms here.
It was so bad. It was so bad. So we were in the car on our way there, and I remember like my hands were physically sweating. Wow. Like I was rubbing them together, and they were wet, and like my feet were sweating. My whole body felt like tense. Yeah. Like literally, I was not like, I couldn't relax. I was literally like clenching my teeth. Wow. And I was like, am I gonna die? And then like I would tell myself, no, you can't die on mushrooms. Because like, I heard that, you know.
Like so embarrassing.
Like, you're like going back and forth in your mind. And then like I was thinking like, should I tell them like to call the ambulance? And I'm like, no. They say that it's okay. Like they say that it'll be fine in a couple hours. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we get to the hike, and it's all snow, so it's really cold, you know. But it's crazy because I don't feel anything. I can't feel the cold. Dang. They're like, oh, it's so cold out here. And I'm like pretending like, oh my gosh, yes, it's freezing.
You're all fake shivering.
I was like, oh, it's so cold. But I didn't feel anything. It was so bad. And I remember like we're walking, and the snow's falling, and I'm like, whoa, like I'm in another universe. Yeah. And I remember telling them, it was so weird. So I remember looking at the sky, and I didn't like physically see anything, but it's weird because I felt like I was like seeing like demons over us, but like I didn't see it, but like I had a feeling, you know? Yeah. And so I remember telling them, like, I remember exactly where we were walking. We're walking down this path, and I told them, I was like, guys, I just entered. I can't say without laughing because it's like ridiculous now. Yeah. I'm like, guys, I just entered into another dimension. And they were like, oh my gosh, really? And
they're like, we're in California, Laila.
They're like, you look the same, like you're right. I'm done. It was so crazy. And then I'm like, yes, I did. And I'm like, guys, guys, like, I'm seeing things. And they're probably, like, thought I was crazy. You
Yeah.
know? And I'm, like, so embarrassed now.
At least we can laugh about it now.
Seriously. I'm, like, so glad. Like, praise God that he brought me out of that.
Yeah.
Because I was going crazy, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, all these, it's like downloads come into your mind because it's like you're thinking these things, but it's not from you.
Yeah.
It's from the enemy, you know? So he was literally putting things in my mind, telling me that I was in hell and, like, there were demons, like, controlling everything. Like, I literally lost hope in that moment because, like, that trip, it turned into a bad trip because I took too many, you know? And so, like, in that moment, I was telling my friends, like, I don't know, guys, like, I'm feeling like we're in hell, and I don't know if there's a way to get out, but, like, that's what I'm being told, and I feel like there's no way. And then I started crying to them, and I was like, why am I here? Like, what did I do to get here?
Wow.
It was crazy. And then I'm like, and then my little sister, like, because I love my sisters, you know? So I started thinking about them, and I'm like, what did they do to get to hell?
Wow.
And how do we get out, you know? Because I literally thought that we were in hell. And then they were just like, wow, I don't know. They're like,
the boyfriend's like,
hell?
babe, you're not hanging out with her anymore.
Oh my God. It's crazy. Yeah, seriously. He's like, I don't think this is good. It was crazy. So it was crazy because, like, at that moment, we had come to the end of the hike, and there was a sign. Well, it wasn't the end, but there was, like, a sign that said, mountain lion spotted recently, turn back. And I was like,
it just gets worse.
It gets worse. I was tripping, and I was like, and then they were like, should we keep walking? And I'm like,
my gosh.
I was like, you guys can keep walking. I'm leaving. Like, I am not trying to have a worse trip than I'm already having.
Oh my gosh.
Because things when you're tripping, it's like everything is times a million.
Yeah.
You know? So I was like, no. Like, so we ended up turning back. And on the way home, I was still tripping. So that was like the peak, what they call it, when you feel everything, you know?
Wow.
So on the way home, this guy, her boyfriend, puts on like A$AP Rocky, and the song is Praise the Lord, which is so ironic. Like,
that's
I
crazy.
don't know why the name of it's not Praising the Lord at all. Like, I have no idea why.
Yeah.
But he puts on that song, and it's like so demonic, you know? And I remember in that moment, it's so weird because I was in the New Age, I was tripping off mushrooms, but that opened me up to the demonic realm. Like, it actually made me understand that there is a demonic, and then there is, like, you know, like the regular, the physical, and then there's good. But it's crazy because I was tripping off shrooms when I was revealed to the demonic realm, you know, and that's the moment, like, when I heard that music and I had that bad trip, that I understood, and I felt, like, so deep that there was, like, evil in this world, and there's evil in the spiritual, and we can't see it. But I felt that it was so dark, you know? And so I try to tell my friends that and explain to them. We get home, I'm kind of coming down, and then they're like, oh, guys, should we watch The Conjuring?
What?
I'm like, what?
Oh,
what?
my
no,
gosh.
tripping, you know? So we literally watched, like, 10 minutes of it, and I'm like, turn this off. Like, I can't do this right now.
Oh, my gosh. It's terrible.
I'm like, you guys just don't get it, you know?
Yeah.
So then they put on this Netflix show called Midnight Gospel, which it's crazy that it's called that. But it's like a new age show. It's on Netflix. It's like a cartoon.
Oh, I think I've seen it. Yeah. I think I like started watching like one episode of it, and it's like a trippy cartoon, right?
Yeah, like he goes to different universes.
Yeah, okay, I remember.
Yes, and I remember I was tripping watching that, and I just felt so scared in that moment. I remember, like, I had so much fear, and like the next day I woke up, and it's like after a trip like that, like, you don't feel the same, you know? Like, it literally changes you. And I woke up and I was like, dang, like, I'm in hell. Like, I literally had, like, I was sure of it, you know? I was like, I'm in hell. My friends are in hell. My sisters are in hell. And there's something very evil, and I don't know how to get out, you know? And it was crazy. And, like, I remember I left my friend's house, and I think that was, like, the last time that we hung out.
Really?
Yeah, because I came back here, and I ended up, like, I kind of stopped taking mushrooms after that because that trip really scared me. Like, it kind of, and I feel like it's crazy because, you know, it's a very dangerous drug, and no one should ever do that. Yeah. But, like, God met me there because I feel like I had that bad trip for a reason. Yeah. Because it literally, like, scared me away from it, you know? So after that, I was like, I don't really want to do mushrooms anymore. Like, I don't want to mess with that. It's really dark, you know? And so then I met my boyfriend, Chris.
Yeah. Shout out, Chris.
It's crazy. Yeah. Like, we met, like, on Instagram or something, which is so random. Yeah. You know, but God works in mysterious ways.
The curly hair? Was it the good one?
No. I know.
Just kidding.
Stop. No. I remember, like, he texted me, and I was like, okay, who's this guy, you know, and he was like, oh, like, are you, I don't want to put him on blast because I already did it on the last podcast. But he texted me, he was like, are you even real? And I remember I was like, yeah.
Was that his game or what?
That was
he
his
was trying to pick up by you?
I was like, I'm not a bot if that's what you're asking. But actually, like, that's when I started texting him, and like, I think, yeah, like, we went on a date, and we like started just hanging out more. And one day he was just like, and I was still like in the spiritual, like, new age mindset. I just didn't want to do mushrooms anymore. Yeah. But I was still very like in tune with the spiritual. So I was actually trying to like tell him about it. It's crazy because he's Christian. Yeah. I'm new age, you know, which is crazy because like technically in the Christian community, we would say like you should not date someone that is not equally yoked. So it's like either, I was like, one of us is going to convert, you know? And it's crazy because, like, he would try to talk to me about God, but I was trying to talk to him about New Age. So it's like one of us was going to fall, you know? Yeah. And so I remember, like, I would tell him about crystals. I would put them in his car, like, without him knowing.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So I'm like, Christian men, no, maybe you shouldn't date a New Age. Yeah. You shouldn't date someone that's unequally yoked because you don't know what they're doing. Right. You know? Right. I literally put crystals in his car without him knowing. And so, but, like, one day he was like, hey, do you want to come to church with me? And I didn't, like, I wasn't against God because I had my belief. I was very firm, like, it's New Age, it's spiritual. And I think a lot of New Agers think this, like, you can be Christian, you can be Buddha, but either way, it's just, like, if you're in tune with the spiritual, it's your belief. Right. And that's what I think a lot of New Agers would believe. Yeah, like, so whatever your truth is. Yeah, so then I was like, okay, so I wasn't, like, against it, you know? So I was like, I'll go to church, whatever. So I just wanted to hang out with him, you know? Yeah. So we ended up going to, like, a Thursday night Bible study. That was my first church, and my first church service there. And I remember, like, what really caught me was the worship because I've always been, like, a music person. Yeah. Even, like, in New Age, I was listening to these, like, frequency musics, you know? And so I always, like, tapped into music to, like, connect me, you know? And so when I heard the worship, I was like, oh, wow, this is so beautiful. Yeah. But, like, it was weird because I was connecting worship with New Age. Yeah. You know? So I was like, I wonder what frequencies they're using. Like,
you all go to the soundboard. You're like, what frequency is this? It's really good. I'm like, hey, I'm really high vibe right now.
I'm like, hey, Mer, can you drop me the beat?
I'm done. Literally. You bring your sound bowl. Oh, yeah. I'm done.
That'd be so bad. I'm like, I'm gonna try to recreate this at home. Like,
I'm done.
It was so bad. So I was literally thinking, like, I wonder what frequency this is. Like, this is so good. Yeah. And I thought it was like something that tied into New Age. Yeah. Like all like the things. And I remember Antoinette sang a song, Nothing Else. And I kind of forgot how it goes, but it's a really good song. And I remember, like, it was weird. This was when we were at this was on a Sunday at the Women's Club. And so I kept going to church, you know, just because I wanted to hang out with him. But the more I went, the more I kind of was, like, opening up. Yeah. So Antoinette was singing this song, Nothing Else, at the Women's Club. And I remember, like, the chandeliers. There used to be, like, chandeliers in there. Yeah. The lights were, like, gleaming. And it was, like, literally, like, a spiritual experience for me. Wow. But it's weird because, like, I was so confused because it's, like, we're worshiping God. But it's crazy because you can be in that moment and you can be feeling the music. But that doesn't mean that you're worshiping God. Right. Because I wasn't worshiping God. You know, I was enjoying the music but I was experiencing it as, like, my own spiritual experience. Right. And I wasn't even correlating it with the fact that it was supposed to be worshiping God, you know? And so I was like, wow, this song is so beautiful and all that stuff. And then pastor, like, he would go into his word and, like, I felt so much conviction back then, which now I know it's conviction, like, to the point where, like, you can feel it in your chest, you know? Oh, like, yeah. When he would talk, I was like, oh, he's talking about me. Like, oh, so rude, you know? Like, that's what I was thinking. And I'm like, that's messed up.
How does he know?
And, like, one time he was talking about, like, hippies, and I'm like, why are you talking about me, you know? Yeah. And I felt so, like, bad, but I kept going,
that's
you know?
so funny.
And, like, yeah, I just, like, started opening up more and more. And I was still, like, on the fence. I was really confused. And I think that's how, you know, that's how it is when you're kind of going out of the New Age. Yeah. Into Christianity, you get confused because you're like, what's the truth? Yeah. I was like, I'm so lost, you know? Yeah. And that's when, like, Manny started doing his podcast, you know? And you were on the podcast. Yeah. And I was watching, like, all his podcast videos because they were, like, very interesting. And I remember seeing your video come up, and it was, like, New Age to Christianity. And I was like, like that's, I was like, do I want to watch this?
Yeah.
I'm like, I had a feeling. I was like, oh, I already know that this is probably gonna like irk something in me and convict me. But I was interested, you know. I'm like, I want to see what she's gonna say, and I want to see like what their take is on New Age.
Yeah.
Because you know, like Pastor would talk about like his messages and stuff, but no one had ever like talked to me, or in the church or anything. No one like talked to me, or I've never seen like anything about what is Christianity's take on New Age.
Yeah.
So I didn't know, you know. So I was like, I want to see, you know. And so I saw your podcast, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that's what I'm in, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she like did everything that I did. Yeah. And I remember I was like putting up my curtains, and at the end of your podcast, I was like completely wrecked. I was just like, wow, like I was like, I think that I want to like follow Jesus. Wow. Like I want to give this a shot, because she was doing exactly what I'm doing, and now she's out of it, you know. And the reason that I really wanted to step out of New Age was because like, yeah, I felt like in tune spiritually and stuff, but it's like you always feel like there's still something dark there. Yeah. You know, and with that, it's like all of my relationships were still down the drain, you know. I didn't get along with my mom. I still like didn't really get along with my friends, or we just went out to party. I was still sad. I was still like searching for weed anywhere I could. I couldn't hold a job. So it's like, even though I felt like, oh, I might know the answer spiritually, everything around me was a mess, you know. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm willing to give Jesus a try. Wow. You know. So after watching your podcast, I remember I got like all my stuff that I had in my room that was like tied to New Age, like the crystals and the books, and like I took a picture of it and I put it on my Instagram, and I was like, I'm not following this anymore, like I'm following Jesus.
Come on.
And like it's crazy because there was this girl who followed me. She's actually one of my family members, which I love her, but she was like in this like New Age crystal phase. So she was selling me crystals because I was starting a business.
Yeah,
you know?
I remember that.
Yeah, I was trying to like sell crystals, and she saw my story. She was like, what? You know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, like it's not following it. This doesn't tie in with God. So I can't, you can't have both, you know? And so I was like, I want to follow Jesus. And I posted it on my story. And I remember I was like, very confused. I was still kind of on the fence. So I was like, God, like I'm gonna follow you wholeheartedly for 21 days. Like I'm not gonna follow these, I'm gonna throw this away. Like for 21 days I'm gonna give it a try. And if I'm still like confused at the end and I still don't know, like then I'm just gonna go back to New Age, because I don't want to be in this like limbo forever, you know. So like I literally lost count, because it's like boom, right away, you know. I texted you I think that night, and I was like, Christina, hi. We never talked before, you know?
Yeah, you're like, I go to Harvest Time, you may not know me, but I go there. Can I talk to you? I was like, yes.
I sent you like a whole paragraph. And I'm like, I just saw your podcast, like, can I talk to you on Thursday? And you were like so nice to me, you know. Aww. And then Thursday, I remember I walked in, and it's crazy because like you can feel like it's so crazy because it's like it's all spiritual. This isn't, it's not really physical, like you, it's not I'm not like changing anything physically about me, but it's like it's all spiritual, you know. So but it's crazy because it's so real, like you can feel it affects you. And so I remember walking in, and I was wearing like a leather jacket, and Antoinette was singing, and I felt like I felt so like raw, like I don't know how to explain it, like I felt so not like embarrassed, but I just felt like, dang, like I don't know who I am. I don't know, like I just felt like completely like stripped of everything that I've known.
Exactly.
So it feels like I'm walking in there like a new person, you know, and I didn't know who I was at that point. So it felt like I was honestly really uncomfortable coming into that service. But I remember Antoinette was singing the song Shepherd. And like it's like, you're my shepherd.
I love that song.
Yes.
I love when she sings that song.
Yes, it's so good. And it says like, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Wow. And I was like, so dang, beautiful. Like I was like, I'm gonna cry. But I felt like in that moment, like God was like, you walk through that valley, you know, and the shadow of death. But I felt like I'm not gonna fear the evil that maybe in my life, or maybe trying to come back, like because I'm gonna fall, because God is my shepherd, you know. So I remember like after that service, I talked to you, and you were so real with me. You were so nice, but you were like, Laila, like you can't do both. And I appreciate that realness, because you were like, it's either one or the other. You know, you can't like say you're gonna follow God but still like meditate, and it's either one or the other. And I remember thinking like, okay, it's gonna be God then. You know. And like ever since then, like I never went back. Like I literally stopped smoking weed that day. I think I was drinking alcohol like maybe 3 weeks after that, and then I kind of just threw it away. I'm like, I don't need this, you know? And it's just like, it's crazy because it was just like a shift in me. And it's Jesus, you know? Like, it's crazy, like, you can't see him physically. It's not like I met this new friend, like, physically, but it's like spiritually he's what I needed. He was what I was trying to find. And so as soon as like he came into my life, like I felt that longing. It was complete, you know? And so after that, I just started coming to church every service, and I threw away everything else. I started reading my Bible. I started listening to worship. Chris and I, like, our relationship got so much stronger because now we're both Christian, and we're both following God. And like I remember maybe like months later, maybe like 7 months later or something, I got asked to be on my first ministry, which was Kingdom Kids.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And boom, like, and then I was in, and I never went back.
That's so beautiful. I've heard this story so many times, but I still love hearing it so much. Like, it's so amazing to see that, like, you know, even this episode, right, that we're filming right now, we may think like, oh, we're just chatting, but in reality, like, man, I pray that this does something in someone's life the way that it did for you. Like, I pray that, like, you know, this wakes someone up to the truth, because like I got saved through like an Instagram live TV, or what was it, like Instagram TV, right? And they did like a live video. I got saved through that. You know, you got saved through a podcast, and it's like, what more if we continue to just share our testimony, you know, like continue to share what God has done in our lives and like what he can do for so many others. And that's truly like what I pray for. And especially like us as New Agers, we know that they're good-hearted people. To their core, they're good people, and they genuinely believe that what they're doing is good, and what they're doing is for God, and what they're doing by spreading that is helping other people, because they have that heart, right, of wanting to help other people and help other people see the truth and get out of this rat race and get out of, you know, just living in the physical. But it's like, it's dark, you know, there's very dark roots to it, and we don't know it. And I feel like it's almost too, it's like when you're in that cycle of New Age, like, you want to get out, you feel like there's something more, but you don't know how to or what it is, or that the answer is Jesus, because it's the only way out, it's the only answer. And it's so beautiful that, you know, God works in different ways in everybody's lives, and I'm so grateful that, yes, even though, you know, we say don't be unequally yoked with the person that you're trying to date, but man, isn't it so beautiful that what the enemy meant for evil, with, you know, you and Chris coming together, because I'm sure the enemy was like, I'm gonna get him, you know, like I'm gonna have her influence him, but God was like, no, like I'm gonna influence her, and she's gonna work for me, and my hand is gonna be over her, and his hand was over you in those moments, even if you weren't worshiping him per se in that time, right? But God already knew, and he already had your story written and the plan written for you. And so it's just so beautiful that, you know, you came, even though, because I get it, even for me, like when I got saved, right? Like, and I knew when I watched that video and literally New Age got yanked away from me, I knew that I knew, even though I didn't want it to be the truth, because New Age was my comfort and my identity. I didn't want it to be true, but I knew that it was truth. And I think that's something that it gets, like, it's almost like it gets woken up with inside of you, but it's like, I want to say it's like spiritually, you're like receiving the Holy Spirit, or like, you know, seeing Jesus as your Lord and Savior for the first time. When you come to that realization, there's no going back. Like, there really is no going back. But given all the stuff that we've gone through in New Age, there's still stuff that you'll have to work out after the fact, you know? It doesn't all go away within that moment. But it's so beautiful that, like, even you kept coming. Like, you kept coming to church, even though you may have not agreed with everything, you were still like, I'm still gonna come. And I remember, like, too, when I first got saved, I was like, I don't agree with this, but I'm a Christian now. But it's because of those deeply rooted New Age belief systems that were in me. And yeah, so it's just so beautiful to see that. And like, I remember when you messaged me, and I was like, yeah, of course, like, let's talk. And honestly, I didn't even know, like, I had seen you a couple times at service, but I didn't have you on Instagram. So like, I didn't know that you were into New Age. I didn't know that you know, had a crystal business. Like, I didn't know any of this stuff. I just knew you as like, oh, she comes to harvest time, you know? And so I had no idea that we had someone who was involved in New Age at HTC. Like, I literally had no idea. And so when you messaged me, I was like, yes, of course. And I remember talking to you that night, and It's funny because that night I was on staff already. I was I want to say I was on the greeting team and I was opening, right? But I wasn't like in leadership yet. I wasn't on the prayer team specifically. Yeah. And I remember I prayed for you, but I was still new. So I didn't know, guys. I'm sorry. I didn't know that if you're not on the prayer team, you shouldn't be going around praying for people at church. Yeah. And then I remember I found that out after the fact. Like, I think like a couple months after, we had like a leaders and staff meeting and pastor touched on that. And like my heart sank. I was like, I prayed for Laila. I was like, oh my gosh. But like, it was just so beautiful. Like in that moment, like Holy Spirit just took over. And like, honestly, like, and that gives me encouragement too, because I feel like maybe like there's times where I'm not as bold anymore with preaching my testimony. So that gives me encouragement. Like, no, be bold about your testimony, you know, like say like it's white, it's black and white, there's no in between, there's no fence, you know. And so I know you share that with me, that I was so straightforward with you and telling you like you can't do this anymore, you know. And it's just so awesome. And then we got to pray together, and I prayed that there would be no confusion in your life and God would show you the truth, and it's so beautiful. But to see where you were that day, right, when we prayed and we talked about it, and like now how you mentioned you got asked to be in a couple minutes, well, that first ministry after the fact. But tell us where you're at now, man. It's so awesome. I get so excited because I look at you sometimes, like I don't want to spoil it, I'll let you say, but I look at you when you're serving in those ministries and I'm like, man, it touches my heart so much. And I always tell you, like, I encourage you, I'm like, Lay, like, man, I'm so proud of you, Laila. I remember when you got baptized, right? And I'll let you talk about that too, but we were in our power service that morning. And you were getting baptized that day, and you know, I was encouraging you, and I just started crying because I'm like, dude, I know I'm gonna cry now, but I know how hard it is to walk away from New Age. Like, it's so hard because it's your whole life, it's your whole identity, and it's what you identify with. And to know, like, I can't do this anymore, I have to walk away from it. It's not easy. And that's why a lot of people go back and forth of like, well, I'll still do this and I'll still do that. And that's why I wanted to make sure to tell you, you can't do that anymore. You know, you have to choose, because sometimes it's not as easy for other people to just walk away from it all. And it's hard, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it. But I'll let you share, like, what was that, this from there to now, what was that season like? Because man, I'm so proud of you, Laila. I love you.
Yeah, I mean, God is so good. I mean, I remember, so I started going, and then I want to touch on like deliverance. Yes. Because I really do believe that everyone, if you come out of the world into Christianity, you're gonna need deliverance, because like you've gone through things, you've seen things, you've watched things, you've listened to things that have opened doors and brought things into your life and into who you are. You know. And so I remember, like, I actually didn't know what deliverance was. It's crazy. Like, I think I've heard it. I heard the term, obviously, because I knew, like, the word deliverance. But I never seen it happen before. I never, like, heard stories of, like, what happens or how it looks or anything. But I remember, like, it would just, like, deliverance is freedom. And that's what I heard, you know? So I remember for, like, after I started coming a couple months, I kept hearing, like, God telling me, like, deliverance, you know, you need deliverance. So, you know, one Thursday night, Pastor did an altar call. And it was crazy because, like, I was kind of in the back because I had a feeling, like, you know, something was going to happen. So I was like, what? I'm like, altar call, okay. You know, I was in the corner on the back. I'm like, you know.
You're all walking backwards to the back.
Like, okay. Like, but it's crazy because our church is so, like, in tune with, like, God's spirit and will, because everyone just kept, like, pushing me forward, you know? Like, and some people, like, they didn't even mean to. They're just like, oh, sorry, go ahead. You know? Like, I'm like, no, I wasn't trying to. But, like, they just knew, you know? Like, I remember Lizzie was like, oh, go ahead, amiga. You know? Like, okay. And so I get to the front. Don't know how I get there. People just knew. And so I'm at the front, and I remember Pastor's like, what do you want God to do in your life? And I'm like, I need deliverance. Wow. And he was like, okay, let's go to the side. He's like, all right.
He rolls his sleeves up.
All right. It was funny because he's like, let's go to the side. I'm like, to the side? Like, okay.
That's
I'm
funny.
like, can do it right here? So I remember, like, going over there, and he's like, okay, like, tell Jesus. And I love this about Pastor. He's like, because he's like, I'm not the one that's going to deliver you. Like, Jesus is going to deliver you, you know? So he's, like, praying for me. He lays hands on me. But he's like, you need to tell Jesus, like, Jesus, I want deliverance. Jesus, deliver me from my past, you know? And so I start saying it. And he's like, say it louder. And I'm like, oh, I'm embarrassed, you know?
So say it with your chest,
I
Laila.
was like, okay. So I was like, all right, fine. And it's crazy crazy because once you break past that point of like embarrassment, and this is like with worship, with prayer, with speaking in tongues, everything, like once you break past that point of like people are watching me, it's freedom, and it's just, you just let it out, you know? And so I was like, okay, fine. So I remember like I yelled it. I'm like, I want deliverance. Everyone's probably like, oh no. Someone get the trash can, you know? And so like,
assume position, everybody.
Everyone's like, oh. Roman's like, all right, guys, lock it.
Roman, literally.
It was so funny. But so then he was like, okay. So he starts praying for me like as soon as Pastor laid his hand on me, and I love it because like he like never has to push me or anything. It's like the softest lay of a hand, and boom, like the Spirit knocks me over onto the floor. And I just remember like I was shaking, and I had never seen deliverance. Like now, like when people say like, oh, deliverance is fake or anything, I'm like, I know, like, it's not, because I had never seen it. I had no idea what it looked like. I barely knew what it was, but I was on the floor, like, I started shaking. I don't even know how long it lasted. It felt like 10 minutes, but people told me it was like an hour or more. I'm like, what? So all I remember from that is, like, shaking in the beginning, and then, like, laying on the ground and, like, popping up and then going back down.
Wow.
And then I remember, like, someone yelling, like, get out, like, it's moving day. I was like, what?
Who's moving?
Moving. It's crazy because in that moment, I was like, huh? It's crazy because it's like, it's spiritual. So it's like kind of like, it was like my flesh. It's like, it all works in one, but it's like my mind, like, it's crazy because like I hear my own thoughts, but then like what's happening in my body and like the things that I'm saying are not me, because I have my own thoughts that I'm thinking while this is happening. Like I remember thinking like, oh, like what's happening? I remember thinking like, okay, someone just said moving out, like what does that mean? But like everything on the outside was something completely separate from me. And that's like kind of, it's crazy, you know? And so I remember like after that, like, oh my gosh, everyone was so nice to me. I remember sitting down and everyone's like, congratulations. And I'm like, huh? But I was like, okay.
Congratulations on getting all those demons out, girl.
Like, I was like, you're a new person. And it's crazy because you feel new. Yeah. Brand new. Like, I felt like, it's almost like I felt like when I walked into church after I watched your podcast, I felt like that, like new, like someone new, you know?
Right.
And it's so insane how you feel. Like, I remember going outside and everything was bright. And I was like, oh my gosh, Chris, do you see? And he's like, huh? And I'm like, it's so light outside, but it's night. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, it's crazy, you know?
He's like, are you doing those crystals again, Laila?
I know. I'm like, no, this is Jesus. This is Jesus. And like, it was just like, oh, God is so good. Like, it's amazing how he works, you know? And I love talking about like my testimony in this because it brings you back to that place, like not forgetting what he did for you. Yeah. And it reminds me, like, and us, like, of the power that he holds and what he can do in someone's life. Like, he's so good. So like after I got deliverance, like I felt free. Like I didn't like have like a lot of those thoughts that I had are ties to the new age. Like it was literally cut off. Like the pastor always says, like the umbilical cord was like taken and like it was put to Jesus, you know? Yeah. And it's like, I feel like, those are steps that every person that's coming into Christianity needs. And I even feel like if you're a Christian for a long time and you watch things or you open new doors in your life, you know, you need deliverance. Right. Because those things, you know, they have a hold on you, you know? Yeah. And so it was amazing, you know? And then I remember Matt Cruz was speaking like a couple months later. I got baptized in fire in the Holy Spirit. Come on. And I remember like I was up there and I just felt like the Holy Spirit like enter into my body. Wow. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I felt him like leave and like all the way out the same way through my fingertips. And I was like, whoa. And then I remember like telling Pudge and Chris after, I was like, God is real. God is real. Like I kept saying it. Like I couldn't stop saying it. Yeah. And they were like, yep. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's so it's like beautiful. New Age is such counterfeit. It's nothing compared to what you experience with Jesus. Yeah. And the thing is, in like New Age, it's like you need to take drugs, you need to do this if you want to even feel a slight bit of that. Yeah. But even when you do feel it, it comes with anxiety. Right. And it comes with darkness and depression, and it comes with those scary moments. But with God, it's like, no, all you have to do is show up. Yes. And he will do the rest. You have to show up with an open heart. Yeah. Ready to receive. I was, you know? And he does everything else. I don't have to pay money. I don't have to say things a million times. Like, he did it all, you know? Yeah. And so, like, you know, I just took those steps as a Christian, you know, becoming stronger in my faith. And I started going to like Our Power and like getting like built up in like Christianity and the Bible and learning more about it.
Yeah.
And like joining ministries like the greeting team, and then I was on the prayer team, which was like so scary for me, like to go up there on stage, you know, and open the church in prayer.
Yeah.
I was so scared, but through it all, it's like, oh, like I give God so much glory, because it's like, as humans, like even as Christians, sometimes we feel like, God, like, am I even worthy to do this? Like, I didn't read my Bible every single day this week.
Yeah.
You know, like, I can't do this. But then he's like, it's not you, like, who's doing it. Like, I'm working through you. That's like, good. Yes, you need to spend time with him in your secret place, because that's where, like, the oil comes from, you know? But he will work in you regardless, you know? And it's not about your works, you know? Yeah. So it was really scary for me to, like, be on the prayer team, but God, like, placed me there, which was amazing. And then, you know, like the worship team, like, which that's crazy to me, because I literally thought I could not sing.
Wow.
I used to do choir, and I was like, I like choir, and then I literally dropped out in high school of choir, because I was like, it's kind of boring, you know. And so everyone, like, would always say, like, oh, you should do the worship team or worship, and it was like not even a thought in my mind. I was like, no, like, that's never gonna happen, you know. But God had different plans, you know, like, it's not what I want. Because, like, amen, it's crazy. Like, I always tell Chris, it's insane. Like, it was never a thought in my mind, but it's like crazy how God works. Because I remember people just kept bringing it up. And I was like, you know, maybe we'll see. Like, no, you know? Yeah. But then one day God was like, no, Laila, like, I'm speaking to you through them. Like, they're just not, like, saying it out of nowhere or trying to push you into it. Especially because I never sang in front of people. So it's not like, you know? And I was like, okay, God, like, at the end of the day, it's like, it takes you to show up and have an obedient and willing heart. Yes. So I'm like, God, whatever you want, like, I'll do it, you know? Like, if that's what you want, okay. And so, like, I remember him telling me, like, okay, yes, like, I want you to look into that. But it takes time. You know? It's like his perfect timing. So praise God, like, he literally placed me on the worship team, which is such a beautiful thing, because I love music, you know? And just to be able to, like, pour out like that, like, it's like that oil, like that love, like, you know, for Jesus. It's amazing. Like, God has done amazing things in my life, and it's beautiful, but it's also, like, I always, like, tell people and remind myself, like, everything that he does in our life, like, he saved us, and now we have a relationship with him, which is so beautiful. But, like, the reason he's doing these things and putting us in these places is now to reach those who are still in New Age, or who, you know, and that's exactly what you're doing through this podcast, or, like, who are still in the world. And, like, I feel that so strongly, like, with evangelism and, like, things like this, like the podcast, like, reaching the world, because we have, you know, come into communion and we've come back to the garden, but there's so many people out there who are still lost and still depressed and searching for the answer. And it's like, God is the one who created them. Yeah. And if he's their creator, which he is, like, all it takes is for a touch of his presence, like a touch of his spirit. And, like, I really do believe, like, there's people out there who might not even think about God, but as soon as they feel that, or, like, understand and know who he is, and, like, that veil is torn, they'll come to him, because he created them. Amen. You know, it's their father. That's so good. It's like, God is amazing. Like, I can't even believe how I am now. I would have never seen it. Yeah. My family's actually barely starting to believe it. Really? Yeah. Like, a lot of them are like, okay, yeah, it's been a couple years. We believe you. Yeah. You know, but God is so good.
Yeah, that's so good, Lay. Man, it's so beautiful. And I love so much that, like, your journey specifically started with you being captivated by the worship. Yeah. Like, that was literally, you would come to church and you were like, whoa, so intrigued by the worship. Now fast forward, it's like God was like, yeah, that's because I was already starting to work in you, and, like, now you're on the worship team. And man, I think I even told you, there was, you know, I love so much when you specifically lead the song The Blood. When you lead The Blood, you sing it with so much weight and so much power, because the way that the blood has transformed your life. And so that's the one song I love so much. And it, like, I cry every time you sing it, because it's so beautiful, because I know that there's just so much meaning behind when you sing that song, because of your living proof of what a loving God can do in someone's life when you let them. Good. It's so beautiful. But man, your testimony is so amazing, Laila. I can hear it over and over and over again. It's so beautiful. But I just want to thank you so much for coming on and for sharing what God has done in your life. And I know and I pray that this will help transform someone's life out of New Age, you know, out of darkness into the light. But Thank you, Lay, for coming on. Love you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for watching and tuning in to, yet another episode of New Age to New Life podcast. If this episode blessed you in any way, please share it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and just support the channel, because this is really what we're doing, is we're really, exposing the enemy's works and exposing the darkness. So we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.